March. I think probably the biggest piece of news is obviously Raghu's been appointed Pat Gelsinger's successor, so he's now the new CEO of VMware. His Twitter handle's there if you want to tweet him and say hello. I'm sure he'll be more than happy to receive your product feedback directly. VMware and there's VMware and Dell are, I think they've completed or they're still in the last stages of. To be honest, I work in the financial services industry and I don't understand it. It's quite a complicated spin-off of some equity. You can read all about it on the internet. The one thing I did really want to draw your attention to, and I'm sure we're all diligent and we do watch the security advisories that come from VMware. So this is VMSA 2021-0010 has been talked about for a while, since I think at least February. There have been a couple of fixes and updates. If you search for that VMSA article number, you'll get to the latest knowledge base page about that. This is a pretty serious one. If you look at the CSS scale for this, it goes up to 9.8, right? And given the worst on that scale is 10, this is a pretty severe one. So the patches have been out for a while. The guidance has been updated in the last couple of weeks. So I would urge you to go and have a look at that. There's also been a lot of coverage in the press of people who have their vCenters connected directly to the internet. I kind of have to ask why, because to me, this is the equivalent of taking ILOs or DRACs out of the back of your servers and plugging them directly onto the internet. That's never a good idea. I can't understand anybody that would do that. But, there are over 5,000 of them, I think, at last count on the internet that were unpatched. So that really needs to be done. I'm sure everyone on here does the right thing, but make sure you spread the word.
Just to add to that, Simon, quickly. Sorry, there was another VMSA that got released 48 hours ago now. So it's worth people checking that one out as well, because it's, again, another authentication one. So
do you want to stick the number in the chat?
I will do. Yeah, literally hot off the press. Yeah. I just thought I'd mention it because I've been working on that one. So I'll stick it in the chat for anyone as well. But keep an eye on that one, because it does leverage people being able to get in unauthenticated by the looks of it. So that's it's not quite 9.8, but it's still pretty scary.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of reinforces. I mean, even lab equipment. I mean, I never used to think too much about my lab equipment. It's on my own network, and it's. But if you look at the way some of the ransomware things now spread, right? If you get something like that on your home network, that could potentially then trash a whole bunch of other stuff that you've got that maybe you didn't think would be particularly at risk, or worse, use your lab equipment that you've been a bit lackadaisical in patching as a vector to get to something that you do care about a lot more. So yeah, definitely worth looking at. In tech, I mean, there haven't been a huge amount of kind of product announcements from VMware since we last met, but there's certainly been a lot of discussion about RAN, or radio access network. So this is, for me, I used to work in the telco space. Telcos used to be all about really kind of big, heavy, expensive hardware that they put into racks and distributed around the country. Sound familiar? It's kind of what we used to do before virtualization. So VMware have done a whole bunch of work, over the last 10 years with those to be able to support kind of virtualized instances of carrier equipment, so things that would carry voice, for example. And now as we get into 5G, all of the more complicated things like the stuff that physically manages radio masts, all the telemetry and things that come with that. So, there's quite interesting press releases and some technical detail around it. I mean, really, it's kind of one of these kind of industry branding pieces, bits of VMware technology kind of grouped together into logical lumps for vertical markets. But there's some really cool stuff there, and certainly making use of some of the Tanzu functionality and some of the very clever software that's there from Cohere Technologies to deliver that stuff out to the radio edge, if you want to put it that way, right? So we were talking about masts earlier, but this is something that potentially runs in a cabinet at the end of your street in a really small form factor. So some quite interesting stuff to look at there. So if I were to look at our agenda today, so once I shut up and managed to hopefully fix my router a bit later on, so we've got Vern up after. Quite an interesting topic. We've got a short break, so we'll do the same sort of thing as we usually do. If you want to grab yourself a coffee or beverage of choice, switch on your webcam, and we'll have a bit of a chat during the break. We then got Gareth to come and look at microsegmentation with VRNI and NSXT. Lunch, I think I've said this joke's getting a bit old now, but to bring your own lunch affair. Unfortunately, we can't provide sandwiches as we would usually do if we were in person. So, we'll be hanging around during that time. So if you want to come and similarly, turn on your camera and we'll have a bit of a chat. And then Robbie is talking about Tanzu Build Service, which actually definitely looks very interesting, particularly if you look at how that maps into a lot of VMware's product strategy around Tanzu and containers, etc. Then got another short break. We have tried to space it out as much as possible today because it is, sitting on your in your chair back to back through sessions obviously does get a bit tiring. So then we're going to close out with Gary's VRA and Terraform session. So we're going to wrap slightly earlier than we usually do. There's a slight error on this slide in that we're not going to do the close for 45 minutes. So I will try and get through that as quickly as possible. And then we will have our kind of virtual drinks by Zoom. So same as we usually do, hang around, bring a drink, bring a biscuit or whatever you want. Given we're doing this online, there's no real requirement for sponsors other than VMware, who obviously provided the, or VMware directly from that, who provide the capabilities of the Zoom, etc., to be here, but we don't have the normal kind of sponsors that we would have. Well, as I said earlier, we're not here to sell you anything. This is one thing that VMUG itself do sell. It is something I think is actually quite good, particularly if you run a home lab environment. You'll see these training licenses that are available. Has 365-day eval licenses for all of these products. I actually have to confess I didn't update this list prior to this, but it will be worth checking and seeing what's on the current list, because if you've ever worked trying to build your own lab environment, you'll know how difficult it can be to get licenses for that, and obviously registering with Dave Smith 1, Dave Smith 2, Dave Smith 3 repeatedly for eval licenses does get a little bit tiring eventually. So it's a good way to get you a 365-day licenses for those products. Particularly given you can get things like NSX on this, which you can't generally get very easily without being very friendly with some kind of sales rep somewhere. It's cool. If you look at the VMware site, I always misread this as $200,000 a year. It's actually not. It's $200 a year, so around about £144. But it does also get you a bunch of other things like discounts on VCAP and VCP exams. So I'd like to try and keep this as interactive as possible during the day. And we normally try and do this during Twitter because it's kind of easy for everybody to get to. So we've got some prizes at the end of the day. We're really looking for the most interesting thing that you stockpiled during lockdown. If we have 400 people tweeting toilet roll, it's not going to be very interesting to try and be creative. This is my kind of my monthly moan, right? So, as I said earlier, we do go to great lengths to make sure that we pick up really good and interesting and relevant technical content. And the way that we do that is by people who are practitioners, people like yourselves who are out there working with the technology, coming to talk about what you do. So we do have this kind of ever-running call for papers, and actually the people you're seeing a bit later on today, several of those actually came in via this forum. So they got in touch, they kind of logged an idea for a topic. Doesn't have to be a fully formed idea. It can be just a kind of rough idea of what you'd like to talk about and an outline, and we can work with you to kind of form that up. You don't have to be the most seasoned presenter, as you've seen from the hash I'm making at this, right? We're open to anything, and we're able to come and help you through that as well. We've done plenty of dry runs for people who maybe aren't that confident in presenting, etc. So, like I say, do get in touch. That URL is permanently available, and we'll try and get you through. So with that, I'll shut up and hand over to Vern, who is our first speaker today. Gareth, I don't know whether you've switched over the...
I'm literally just doing it as we speak now. I just got to find him in the participant list because it's, as we said, tech is against us today as technologists. So
it's not been a great week for anything, is it? It's all gone a bit wrong.
Yeah. The theory is that technology is your friend until it's not, and then it's really, really not.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ironic part is, I mean, I've worked at home, obviously, as everybody has probably, for every day in my fancy shed for the last year and a half, and my broadband connection has been 100% reliable, apart from the one day that I have a day off work to come and present this, and it dies. It's just not helpful. Anyway, I'll shut up and hand over to Vern.
I will share my screen here, hopefully successfully. Everyone will tell me whether or not that's happening. Give me a sec. I'm hoping that's happening. Or do we see a shared screen?
Yeah.
I see nods and thumbs up. Thank you. And we're starting a couple minutes early. I'm assuming that's okay. Folks will be joining us. We also have a YouTube thing going, right?
Yep, we are live on YouTube.
Okay, cool. Well, good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us first thing for the Road to Sustainability, a journey with VMware. So I'm Vern Belenius. I'm a lead cloud solution architect, as many of you know when I wear my daytime hat. But I'm also a member of the C2A, the Office of the CTO, as an ambassador. And in that role, I've been focused on sustainability initiatives. And I'll start this morning with a confession. I am not a hardcore sustainability expert. But the good news there is it's caused me to have to go back and do a lot of learning, a lot of research, taking my own journey on the sustainability path, learning how we define sustainability, what it means to customers, how corporations are registering their own companies as, or to have them recognized as a sustainable entity or pursuing sustainability targets. How are those targets being tracked? What is VMware? What are we ourselves doing as far as our sustainability commitments concerned? And importantly, what are customers benefiting from, or how are they using VMware technologies to help them along their sustainability goals? So I know it's been said already. I want to keep this light. I want to keep this interactive. Feel free to take yourself off mute. We're a small bunch. I've got you open on the on my right here on my monitor. Feel free to take yourself off mute, ask any questions. And of course, if I can't answer a question, I will personally put you back on mute and simply carry on. Also, any feedback on this is welcome. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start by going back and defining sustainability, because if you look on the web, if you do any kind of Google search or look on Wikipedia, you'll find 50 different definitions or more of sustainability. So how are we actually going to define this? And then once we defined it, what do we focus on within sustainability that can be tracked? And again, sustainability has become a buzzword. If any of you, for anyone who hasn't been living under a rock for the past 10 years, which arguably might be environmentally friendly, so good on you. But there's so many different definitions. It's good to set the stage. So corporate targets, what are companies doing to set a target in line with some scientific principles, and how is that target being tracked? And what are the benefits? You'll see that from this as well. And then finally, as I was saying, what are VMware's commitments and what are VMware solutions doing to help customers meet their own sustainability goals? So with that, let me start with what exactly is sustainability. So again, you look on the net and there's a ton of different definitions. But when I was going back and again doing my due diligence, I liked one definition, which was really very simple, and it's based on the daily rules, spelled D-A-L-Y, note, not D-A-I-L-Y, although that might work as well. So the daily rules stem from a former, University of Maryland professor, former chief economist for World Bank. So that's Herman E. Daly, and he based his theory, or he based his rules off theories from a Romanian economist back in 1971. So the interesting thing here as well is this has been with us for over 50 years, and we're only, or I guess exactly 50 years. And so we're only now really starting to act upon this, or actioning this. So three things. So again, these are simple definitions. To be sustainable, we look at renewable, non-renewable, and wastes. So renewable resources, things like, as the graphic depicts, things like fish or groundwater or forests, plants. To be sustainable, simply, you can't use up your renewable resources at a rate faster than which they can be replenished. Again, very straightforward. For non-renewable resources. So the classic example here is oil and gas. You can't use your fossil fuels, your non-renewable resources at a rate faster than they can be replenished by a renewable equivalent. Classic example, replacing oil and gas with clean energy, let's say wind power or solar power. The third one is along wastes or pollution. The earth can naturally absorb toxins. And so to be sustainable, you can't produce more toxins than the earth can naturally absorb. Now you can see that these three are interchangeable, right? So if you replace your non-renewable resources, for example, by renewable resources, so your coal power plant by solar power, you're not burning the coal, and so you're not generating the pollution. So that affects your wastes, right? Makes sense. So the three are interrelated. But when we have three things that are interrelated in the definition, what do we focus on as far as being able to report and track? How do we know how we're doing with our sustainability objectives? So if you look globally, there's a lot about CO2 emissions, and that's not a surprise. CO2 emissions or emissions, gaseous emissions, are the things that make sense to track, and you'll see that in all the reports. It's not just CO2. There are other gases that contribute to the greenhouse effect and global warming. You'll see that listed as CO2e or CO2 equivalent. So methane is a CO2 equivalent, for example. And happily, an event occurred back in 2015 that recognized global warming as a scientific reality. And I know there's some doubters out there, but we're going to go with this as a scientific reality, where 195 countries came together at the United Nations Climate Change Forum, and they formed the Paris Agreement. So 195 countries getting together, deciding that, yes, this is actually a problem. We should globally do something about it, because no one individual, corporation, or government is going to make all the difference. It has to be a combined effort. And so there were four key areas that were focused on or established as part of the Paris Agreement. So just as a little fun quiz, I'm going to put this up on the screen. So they focus on temperatures, a review mechanism, finance, and emissions objectives. So I've listed four of them, I listed three of them here, each with 4 points. And I want you all just go to the chat to let me know what you think which one of these is correct. So temperatures is going to be below 2 degrees, 4 degrees, 1 degree. But in keeping with that, review mechanisms every 5 years, every 10 years. So we have one CEP, so temperature below 1 degree, review every 2 years. Okay, cool. Thanks, Michael. Just take a moment to read through and see what you think. I know it's a little bit to read, but I'll give you a sec here. B, okay. We have a C and we have a B. I was going to make this a Mentimeter, but then I figured if I put this in Mentimeter, it's just going to be too big of a chart. 2 C's and a B, cool. Thanks, Gareth. And die, route, or die, or die rote die, depending on how you want to pronounce that. And a B, so B and C. Okay, thanks, Mark. Long time no see, Mark, by the way. B and C, okay. Cool, thanks, guys. So, in truth, it's actually A. So it's funny that everyone chose B and C. So no, it's A. So from a temperature perspective, the wider target is to keep temperature global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, review the results every 5 years. From a finance perspective, richer countries are expected as of 2021 to contribute to the sustainability initiatives of less fortunate countries. And from an emissions objective, aim for emissions to peak, quote unquote, as soon as possible. Now that's kind of vague, but as it turns out, there's definite financial incentive for them to peak sooner. And you'll see why as we go through. Okay, so that's a high level definition of sustainability. Agreement that we're going to focus on the emissions part, recognition by the Paris Agreement that, yes, this is going to be a global thing. So what has to happen then? How do you make that real? How does a corporation go and say, I'd like to be sustainable, I need to set a target, and that target needs to be in keeping with science, so it's actually making a difference, and how does that get tracked? And so how do we set corporate sustainability goals? I should pause. Any questions so far? Any thoughts or comments? All good? Not rocket science stuff. And again, this is part of a journey, like I said, that I took moving through here and conveying the knowledge here and now. Don't have a lot of cameras up, so I can't see if you're checking the fire alarm because your kids made toast. but I'm going to assume that all is good. All right. So enter Science-Based Targets Initiative. Thanks, Carl. Enter Science-Based Targets Initiative, or SBTI. So this is a partnership between the World Resources Institute, the Carbon Disclosure Program, UN Global Compact, and the World Wildlife Fund, where they offer companies, so this is private sector only, so they offer corporations a very easy path to set and record objectives. So rather than put up slides on it, what I thought we'd do is let's actually go into sciencebasedtargets.org, give it a second to come up, and let's take a look at the 5 steps. Quick confirmation, making sure everyone can still see this on the screen. This is the 5 steps that should be up. Give me a nod or
I've got the Science-Based Targets Initiative on mine.
Yep, same for me.
Oh, it does. It doesn't say step-by-step process?
No.
No, I
Okay.
think you've still got the slide.
Got the logos.
All right, so you're seeing this, yes?
Yep.
But not the other. Okay, well that's I can fix that. What I'll do is go to that where we just opened up the page. I will make it non-full screen, and then I will bring that. No, see, now you can see it. Yeah.
No,
Not yet.
still a slide deck.
No.
Okay.
Oh.
Well, that's not very helpful. Not very helpful at all. How are we going to do the 5 steps?
I think we had this issue before with the VMware presenter, I think.
Here, this is
Sharing.
I'll just have to stop the share and then put this on the
Yeah.
screen. I just don't want to stop the share because it's interruptive. Okay, then I'll get rid of this. So there we go. Okay, sorry about that. So 5-step process. It's fairly straightforward. Again, they're trying to make it easy for corporations to do this. So the first step is to,
Slide
everyone
deck,
can
yeah.
see this, right?
Yeah, we're still on the slide deck.
Are you
Okay,
just sharing the PowerPoint application instead of your
No,
desktop
no,
mobile?
I was sharing the, or I'll stop my share and reshare. I was sharing the screen, the desk itself. All right, let's try this again. Share screen.
I think we've had this issue with Macs before where there's a privacy thing that's caused all reams of chaos.
Yeah, but I mean, this is not the first time, obviously, that I've been sharing screens, right? We've been doing nothing but sharing the screen.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought.
You'd think, right?
All right, so share screen.
Too true, Alex, too true.
Wow, it really is just the, what do I do? Yeah, this is a first, folks. This is not I've never had can't share the full desktop. It only allows me to pick from amongst applications, not the full screen. Is this some weirdness of
I
the
think
way we're
it's
running Zoom here today?
Yeah, it's VMware thing.
Okay. All right, no problem. We'll do this and then I'll just have to switch back and forth. Apologies. Right.
Nice.
So step-by-step process. So 5 steps, again, straightforward. Company goes and writes a letter to the Science-Based Targets Institute saying, I am going to commit to establishing a science-based target for sustainability. And at that point, they have 24 months to develop a plan in keeping with specific criteria, again, science-based targets. And then they submit that to the SBTI folks. This is not expensive, by the way. I should pause. When this is, as a nonprofit, the process of submitting for a large corporation is only 5,000 US. And that gives you 2 cracks at it. So if you submit your targets, they review it and they say, no, you need to change a few things. They give you some guidance. You go back, you change it, and then you've fully registered, you fully submitted that action plan. So they put you up on their website so that you're acknowledged as a leader who wants to go down the path of sustainability. You then are able to communicate your targets and your plan to your stakeholders. So these are your internal, your external stakeholders, your investors. And then finally, you disclose on a yearly basis, on an annual basis, the progress that you're making towards your sustainability goals. So 5-step process. And if we take a look at some of the companies that are doing that, and so if we go here and you say, let's look at companies taking action, and we'll pick a company. So let's say meet the companies. And let's go down to, where's my There's my little search here. There we are. Let's use Nike as an example. So here's Nike's commitment on the Science-Based Targets Initiative. So Nike has chosen to go for the highest of the targets, the most difficult of the targets, keeping global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And there's a big difference between 1.5 and 2 degrees. And if you click on View Target, you can see the details of their target. So in this particular case, Scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions, 65% by 2030 from a baseline in 2015. And so if you go through each of the companies here, and VMware's there, we'll get to that in a little bit, you can see what all the companies have committed to and how they're tracking. But from a tracking perspective, and this is where we have to do the screen unshare again. Where's my unshare? But if I do this, can you, hey, wait. Does that work? Can you see, or are you still seeing the, you're still seeing the previous share, aren't you?
Yeah, still seeing the web page.
Happily, it's a good web page, but that doesn't help us here. Let me reshare. Back to the PowerPoint. Again, sorry for the disruption. Okay, so once they've gone and they've registered their targets, the next thing to do is to have a method for disclosing them, a globally accepted method. And this is where CDP, or the Carbon Disclosure Project, comes in. So these folks are a nonprofit charity, and they run the global disclosure system, not just for corporations, so for the private sector. Remember, science-based targets is currently only for the private sector, but CDP will monitor and track for investors, companies, cities. You can see it there, city, states, so government, corporations, both private and public, and monitor their environmental impacts. And this is a really big deal. And the reason that it's a really big deal is because of this. If anyone thinks there's not a financial tag associated with this. So on the left, 110 trillion, this is in US dollars, 110 trillion US in investor assets. So this is the result of 590 investors. So these are large investment companies representing over $110 trillion who look to CDP for reports on their potential candidates for investment. So if you're a company that wants to attract investors, it is very much in your best interest to go register your plan, register your tracking with the CDP, with the Carbon Disclosure Project. So you can say, look how well we're doing, and up your stock price or up your investment. And this is very truly a KPI for many investors. They look to see how sustainability is going with their potential investees. The right side, 5.5 trillion. So this isn't purchasing power. And so this is the case where, as a buyer, you have the choice from whom you buy. And if you're looking to be sustainable, you're going to pick someone from your supply chain or within your supply chain who themselves have committed to sustainability goals. And so in this case, so with 200 plus major buyers, they represent 5.5 trillion, and they're looking for suppliers that are going to be equally sustainable or having a sustainability mindset. So again, price tag associated with this, or financial gains associated with this. So what I'd like to do, I'm curious. So out there, what have you seen? If we go and we again stop our share here, and if I share my Mentimeter, which is going to be somewhere here, let's do this. I'll share this, and I'm going to bring in my Mentimeter slide. Do you see the Mentimeter, or does it need to be on the other screen?
On the screen,
anyone? Okay. I can do that. Wow. So we'll go behind the scenes and my presentations. Within my presentations, let me bring up the one that I have for today. And let's play this. Right. So everyone just hop over to menti.com there and put in that code 644-7340, 6440-7340. And I've got 3 choices up on the screen. Again, I'm just curious as to what everyone out there is seeing. So within your own organization, has your company set a sustainability target? Do you have customers that have sustainability targets, or do you have both? So both your company and your customers have set sustainability goals. Okay, so 1 and 1. Okay. I'll give it a minute here for everyone to respond. I'm truly very curious here because we see all different kinds of things. Many organizations, no matter how large or how small, have set sustainability goals. And by the way, the Science-Based Targets Institute makes it very easy for SMEs, so small and medium enterprises, to set sustainability goals because, first of all, they only charge $1,000 for it, and they also have a streamlined process. So you don't have to be a large organization like Nike or like VMware to set sustainability goals. You can do it at any point of size and organization. Okay, so company, customers, both A and B. Okay, interesting to see. I was very curious if we were going to get a lot of both A and B. Cool, thank you. Okay, interesting for all to see. Let me break out of this. Again, stop the share, go back to the PowerPoint. Sorry, folks. Go back to the PowerPoint.
It's all fine.
It's true, that actually is helpful. All right, so there's the Mentimeter. Right, so we now have the definition. We know we're focused on our emission side, our waste, our pollution. We know how to register our sustainability goals with the science-based targets. And we know that they're going to be tracked by the CDP so that investors and suppliers and buyers can go and take a look at that. That's great. So now how do you make it happen? You set this goal. How do you progress towards that goal? So for that, let me talk about 2 things. First, let me talk about what VMware has done as far as our commitments are concerned, as well as our roadmap, our progress and our track record, and then what VMware solutions are enabling customers to do to meet their sustainability goals. So remember I mentioned that we'd see VMware on SBTI. Now, happily I prepared a slide for this because apparently it was going to be difficult to go back, stop sharing, bring that back up, search for VMware. So here it is. So VMware's on there. We also have shot for, or are shooting for and making progress towards the 1.5 degrees Celsius target, so the most strict target. And if you were to go and, so we set this goal in June 2020. And if you were to go into SBTI and click on the View Target button, you would bring up that similar thing that we saw for Nike as far as what VMware has put down as their target. Now, what you'll see there, the type 1 or scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions, all of those are folded into or represented in our sustainability agenda. So VMware last year set something called 30 by 30, or 30 goals for 2030 along the lines of environmental, social, and governance. So a lot of you have heard the ESG term bantered about. And within the environmental, we have our sustainability agenda. And so within sustainability, we have 10 goals. So you can see them on here on the screen, everything from workload carbon efficiency, where we're helping customers with their carbon footprint, right down through sustainable.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No screen.
No screen?
No screen. Sorry, I didn't want to stop your flow because it was good, but yeah, the slide disappeared.
No.
Like Linda,
Stop the flow.
straight in. Sorry, Vern, honey.
That's okay. That's okay. Let's try this again. How's that?
Perfect.
Beautiful.
Excellent.
Oh.
Excellent. This also gives me a chance to close my window because I swear that either the garbage disposal, which is ironic during a sustainability discussion, the garbage truck or the recycling truck comes and picks up, or they choose to cut the grass. But now I'll just sit here and roast. Don't mind me. If I melt, you'll know what's going on. Right, so sorry about that. So 10 goals. These are the 10 goals within the sustainability agenda under 30 for 2030, from workload carbon efficiency, distributed energy, right down through sustainable IT advocacy, in which we advocate for sustainable IT and public policy. I'll talk a little bit more about one of these as we go, but the link at the bottom here, so VMware2020.com, oops, back up, the VMware 2020, VMware.com 2030 Agenda Sustainability. That has information not only on each of these, but also on some of the more rigorous details around how we're reporting to CDP, what the metrics are, the standards that are used. So it's actually interesting to see. It could be bedtime reading because some of the documents are 61 pages long as PDFs, but it shows that this is a very serious thing. So with this, a question then is, we've set this goal, these goals for moving ahead. How have we been doing? So what's our track record to date? Well, happily, it's looking good. I'm going to draw some on this again. This is, you can find this on VMware site. It is a little bit of an eye chart here, but what I want to do is bring some things to attention. Some of these are felling trees on your internet pipe. Ah, yes, there you go. So 1998 through to 2010. So this is just the first of two slides. But in this slide, this is everything from the inception of VMware in 1998. And a couple of things here I think are of interest calling out. So simple things that make a difference. So on the Palo Alto campus, so VMware's headquarters, 750 windows installed. This is back in 2006. And the windows will automatically open and close to prevent the need for air conditioning in the buildings. Cool. Another thing, again, a small thing here, is the use of potato-based disposable utensils. Now, this is at the Palo Alto headquarters, which I think is cool in and of itself. But if any of you here have been to one of the VM worlds in the US over the years, and I don't know if we do this here in EMEA, in Barcelona, but if you were to go to one of the VM worlds in the US, we've taken this potato-based disposable utensils to VMworld. And so I paused a moment to think of that. I remember being surprised when I picked up my potato-ware, as it's called, and thought, huh, does it work? And sure, it works. But then you do the math. So roughly 20,000 attendees at a VMworld, 3 meals a day, call it for 5 days, rough math. That's 300,000 sets of utensils that don't wind up in a landfill. Again, pretty cool. All right. Next slide here speaks a little bit more to modern numbers and actual numbers. So back in 2011, the Palo Alto campus was already running on 100% clean energy. We just had a tree falling comment in the chat. Here's a tree planting statement. So this is back in, again, 2011, 2,500 trees. VMware is currently involved in a Reboot the Earth program where we are planting 1 million acres worth of trees. This is in the southern US. Again, very cool. Reducing water, so in the concept of reduce, recycle, reduce, reuse, recycle. But some of these numbers should also be focused on. So cumulatively over the years, you can see how this is going up. This is what VMware Technologies, to be fair, mostly virtualization, has done globally as far as avoidance of CO2. So from 2003 to 2020, there has been 1.2 billion metric tons of CO2 emissions avoided through VMware Technologies. And this was called out last year in an IDC survey. They're obviously forecasting here into 2021. But you look at the, here, let me build the slide out. You look at some of the numbers here. So again, cumulatively, which is what was on the other slide, 1.2 billion metric tons of CO2 avoided. Forecasting for 2021, 152 million metric tons avoided, and that represents 3% of the global CO2 emissions expected for 2021. And again, this is just through the use of VMware Technologies. So pretty cool. We have a good track record. We're making good progress, and we intend to make good progress as we go forward with our 30 by 30. Well, not everything is in the data center. We know this, right? So what can customers do to help themselves be more sustainable? The World Economic Forum put out guidance along 4 pillars. Again, not every change is in the data center, right? So 4 pillars: product and supply chain, zero waste and energy efficiency, reducing and recycling, and having key metrics and targets. So we take a look at product and supply chain. This goes back to that 5.5 trillion, where as a buyer, you can choose your supplier. And if you source ethically and responsibly, look for suppliers who themselves have sustainability goals, that goes a huge way towards your own sustainability initiatives. Zero waste. A great example of zero waste comes in Disney. We were talking earlier about going to Disney parks, but it turned out to be Legoland. But Disney. So Disney has decreed, this is a number of years back now, that all of their owned and operated franchises are not going to have straws, plastic straws. Again, it's hard to find a plastic straw now, but they led this. And they estimated that as part of that zero waste initiative, and you can look it up on their website, they have saved 175 million straws per year from going into landfill. They've done the same thing with coffee stirs, and now their hotels and their cruise ships have sustainable, refillable things directly in the rooms, and they expect to reduce the recyclables or reduce the landfill by up to 80%. So innovating around life cycles of resources. This speaks to using recycled material in your own product. And you can look no further here than your closest Starbucks, where pretty much all the cups of the coffee sleeves, recyclable material, it says so right on them, right? This is no surprise. McDonald's as well, recycled napkins, recycled, not using plastic straws like Disney. And so there's a big push to use recycled products to produce your products as a producer, as a manufacturer. This last one here is certainly not the least one. It's very big with the C-level. So the C-suite to have sustainable targets, to have put sustainable targets in writing and be meeting those. Again, it's recognized that there's a big financial incentive here through investment as a KPI. So setting goals and being transparent in progress. So here are 4 pillars through which customers can focus to become more sustainable. So now the question on where can VMware help? Where can VMware come into play? Well, we can't come into play equally in all of these, but we can come into play in the zero waste category, the energy efficiency category, and the key metrics and targets. So let's take a look at some of these solutions. This is just one set of examples here. And so again, this is how you, as a VMware professional, can leverage VMware technologies for yourself or for your customers to aid in sustainability. So starting at the top, VMware Cloud Foundation and VMware Cloud. A large portion or a large gain in sustainability can still come from virtualizing the physical servers. We all know that there's still a lot of physical servers out there. Not everyone is virtualized. Many companies are. Not everyone will be 100%. I think we recognize that as well. But there's still tremendous gains to move physical machines to virtual machines. I'll use VMC as an example here as well. So VMware Cloud on AWS because of the example, not just because I'm VMC and AWS biased. So a recent report by 451 Research showed that Amazon data centers are about, on average, 3.5 times more energy efficient than the median of corporate data centers. And so what that means is if you were to shut down your data center, and of course we have a lot of customers who are doing just that, they don't want to be in the data center business themselves anymore, taking those workloads and moving them to, in this example, VMware Cloud on AWS, you are gaining efficiencies in energy consumption or energy reduction just by the move itself. Tanzu, you hear more about Tanzu from Robbie later on, but there's an argument that if you are taking your monolithic applications, you are refactoring them, you're re-architecting them, you are perhaps containerizing them, making them more efficient, there's energy gains to be gained from that. Workspace ONE, this one needs very little introduction here in this day and age of COVID, where home working has become a big thing, but you need a secure place for workers. Workspace ONE, securing the endpoints. And in so doing, and a lot of companies now that COVID is, I don't want to say it, I don't want to jinx it. Now that we're going back to normal, quote unquote, we are still finding that a lot of employees or employers are going to let their staff, their employees work from home. And again, you still need that secure working environment. Workspace ONE comes into that. We're reducing the time spent commuting. We're reducing the emissions from cars, buses, etc., from employees that are going into their corporations. So on the other side of the fence here, when we're talking about setting goals and being transparent in progress, I'm sure most of you are aware or know that vRealize operations can be used to right-size a vSphere environment, identifying zombie VMs that are sitting there, just spinning up, never used, taking up CPU, taking up memory, burning energy. However, I also learned, and I didn't know this, that there is an actual dashboard for CO2 within vRealize operations. And so you can look to see what your CO2 levels are looking like and how much CO2 that you're using directly within vRealize operations. That was kind of cool as far as tracking. Cloud health. So cloud health was built to identify inefficiencies in public clouds. So if you were to turn cloud health onto a native Amazon data center, for example, or your native Amazon virtual private clouds, you'd easily see, and it points out, you could be gaining more efficiency and saving money by removing these, changing these out for these. So it's saving energy, saving money using cloud health. And then last on the list here, again, these are just some examples, Skyline and Wavefront to monitor your vSphere environment for potential problems down the road. That's Skyline. And Wavefront taking a look and providing millions of metrics on the efficiency of your actual applications. So these are some ways through sustainability innovation that VMware solutions can help customers meet their sustainability goals. Another example, we recently announced Zero Carbon Committed Initiative. This is a way by which we're taking customers and bringing them together with VMware cloud partners who themselves are focused on using green energy for their data centers. So that's a Zero Carbon Committed initiative. And that actually fits perfectly into, you remember the chart I had up, the 10 in sustainability, part of 30 for 2030, that was goal number 6. And so helping customers reach that goal. And finally, we also have sustainability data sheets. And this is something that my group within the C2 ambassadors is focused on. We're producing sustainability solution data sheets around a number of VMware solutions that go into how that solution can be used in a sustainability context. There was also a number of other interesting things in the data sheets. There are links to carbon calculators. There are some useful impact stories. You can take this to your customers, or you can use it yourself, saying, look, in this particular case, vRealize operations, this is how we're adding to our sustainability goals or meeting our sustainability targets. With that, we're not quite at the end yet, but we'll have some time for a chat afterwards. So some sustainable takeaways. Setting and tracking targets. We talked about the Science-Based Targets Initiative, setting targets and then tracking those with CDP, remembering that there's a financial piece involved in this. So corporate KPI for many organizations and investors representing trillions of dollars. VMware commitments. So VMware has built sustainability, not just into our solutions, but I'm really happy to say it's taking root as part of corporate culture, like right up the stack, right up the chain from the CEO downwards, along with folks that are responsible for sustainability, for environmental, social, and governance plans. We have our committed 30 by 2030 goals around ESG, and we have a great track record so far. And then, as we'll just walk through some of those examples, helping customers meet sustainability goals with VMware solutions. So far, from 2003 to present, VMware technologies have helped avoid 1.2 billion metric tons of CO2 emissions. We talked about gaining efficiencies through some of the points that I had mentioned before, SDDC consolidation, app modernization, using the vRealize operations example for tracking, and also workforce optimization through Workspace ONE. And through the Zero Carbon Committed Initiative, connecting customers with cloud partners who are focused on renewable energy, helping them with their sustainability goals. One question: why are we doing this out of VMUG? Why does it make sense to do this out of VMUG, having this discussion? And the answer is pretty simple. VMUG globally We are 150,000 plus members in over 200 plus communities. What better place than to have a discussion around sustainability with VMware professionals who can bring that internally, but also spread the message to their customers and amplify the sustainability goals. So thanks everyone, not just for your time here today, but also thank you in advance for taking the message forward internally and broadcasting to your customers. And that's it from me. Any thoughts, questions? Help take yourself off mute with apologies for our multiple back and forth. And like I said, I fessed up, I'm not a sustainability expert, but this was my learnings over the past, 6 or 8 months as I've been focused on these. So I want some, if we still have a few minutes, if you don't mind, is it too simple? Are people looking for something more concrete, tangible? I know at VMUG, we normally have some deep technical discussions, and as a lead solution architect for VMC and AWS, I would normally be giving a deep technical discussion on VMC. So this is a slight departure from that. So what are your thoughts?
I'm happy to add something if that helps.
Yeah, please. Let me stop sharing here because God knows we have troubles with sharing. Right.
Reset my camera as well.
Comments.
So yeah, for me, again, I've kind of started going through this journey at home, and also I've done this with businesses in the past, building eco-friendly data centers and things like that.
Okay.
But one thing where I see it's going to sound strange, I already see this evolving. Everyone's going on about sustainability.
Yeah.
But a lot of what I've done at home, everyone's like, why are you doing it? For me, it's more about self-sustainability, not just sustainability overall. It's all great.
I'm taking notes here. Okay.
For me, this is again going to sound like I'm going on a massive politics mission, but for me, it's great everyone being sustainable. But I hate to say it, I've even been involved in some companies where they say we're sustainable because we're buying green energy, we're offsetting here, we're offsetting there, whereas them themselves aren't being sustainable. They're not looking at processes or things like that. I'm quite fortunate to have like a solar array here. I've gone for the electric cars. I've just had a heat pump. And mine isn't always about being as sustainable as possible, but of that percentage, how much of that can I be self-sustainable? Can I produce my own energy for use at home or my data center? Can I heat my home by using what I'm producing rather than importing from the grid? How can I it sounds a bit of an old way of doing it, but it's all great.
No. I totally approve. And I think that it's sometimes a small step that you take that can be, then if everyone did that one little thing, or everyone did one little thing. And again, I'm not preaching here. I just think and I had to look myself, and I'll fess up to one of the things I did from a sustainability perspective. And it's a small thing. Clearly I go and I use the old shaver and shaving cream. And a couple of months ago, I decided I wasn't going to use canned shaving cream anymore. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to use a little brush, the old school, get the lather going, and paint it on, and then shave it off. I haven't graduated to reuse or non-disposable razors yet, but that's one small thing, and I haven't used a can of shaving cream since. So it actually saves money. That wasn't the impetus for it, and there's no the gas that's in the shaving cream, there's none of that, and I'm not having to worry about the recycling plastic cap or the metal, right? So it's and it lasts far longer for far more shaves than a can of shaving cream. So again, it's one small thing. So I agree that self-sustainability at home, yes, definitely.
Even with businesses, when I've spoken to them about the kind of like when they're looking at things like solar and whatnot, it's looking at. I kind of use my house as a bit of an example. It models it really well. Where I've got the battery and the solar, I charge up during the day, and that battery then alleviates my use of the grid at the most carbon intensive and also potentially sometimes the most cost times, because businesses, some business plans, they can, the power, what you pay throughout the day can go up depending on the busyness of the grid.
Oh yeah. So
that's
normal.
And that's what I'm saying to a lot of companies, like, by installing these solutions, it's great you got solar panels, but have you thought of batteries? And they're like, well, why? Because that costs us money. It's like, well, during those periods, you then can go essentially off grid and run your business on that green energy rather than exporting it to the grid, which can have a financial gain. Well, why don't you just store that for later, and then use that when you can essentially then become more carbon neutral by using it at a later date.
So there's a big thing on that about the grid and how you get your energy. So nuclear's at the bottom, low CO2, but you cannot ramp it up and down very quickly. So end up with Chernobyl. So then you have things which are slow to ramp up and down. That used to be things like coal in the old days. Then you have things that are fast to ramp up and down, which are very cost negative, which is things like gas, which you do at the peak times, like when you have lunch and dinner, etc. But if you use the nuclear, which is CO2 low or renewables or something else, you can do things as they've done in Wales, which is pump a whole lot of water up a mountain into a lake and then release it through at the peak time of days. So you can offset things. So your water could be a battery, just potential energy. But one of the things that we all have is the way we consume, you say the grid. So we all look around, we look through the UK suppliers, and all of them have a green tariff. But what's that mean? If you actually Google around and have a look around, some of them are just buying credits from the Eastern Bloc countries. Hungary had an example where they were selling used credits. So we do have to look if it's really green and really renewable, or has somebody hidden it with some bits of paper.
Rick's kind of hit the nail on the head, and that's where, with all this stuff, that's why I prompted the question about self-sustainability. Is that something businesses are looking into, rather than just going off and buying these green bits of paper to say we're sustainable?
Well, see, I totally agree with that, and that's another thing when we talk about carbon offset, right? Like, if you go and you fly somewhere, you can pay dollars towards the carbon offset, which means the airline is going to invest in some program that plants trees, right? So that you've balanced that out. I mean, that's great, and good on you if that's what you're doing. But at some point in time, it can't be about offsetting. It has to be about not using it in the first place, right? Because there's only so much that you can offset, as opposed to, okay, we are simply ourselves saving water, not doing the burning either ourselves or from one of our suppliers. And so that's a key factor. So I totally agree with what you're saying. Well, we're almost at the we have a break now though, don't we, Linda? Like, we're not okay. We can carry on. We're happy to carry on chatting. I just didn't want us to take us past the 11:45.
I was going to say, Percy, thank you for a great session. It's really interesting to see how you guys are doing it.
Thank you. I was first time I've run this, and I put the deck together a while back, and I just wasn't sure if it was going to be too simple, if I was telling people things that they already knew, or if there was material in there that made sense to go over. So, and tell me honestly, like, was it too simple? Should I be focusing more on metrics? Do people want to know more about the science behind it in a conversation like this? Or is this just at the right level?
I think if you do this one, but then, to almost have a comeback and do more detailed, but, you introduced me, and I'm not speaking on behalf of everybody here, but you introduced me to a lot of things that I didn't know existed.
Okay, good, thank you.
Check that people are committing, and you could publicly see that that's just, that's me not being inquisitive enough, probably, because if I wanted to, I probably could have gone and found it. But
no, I mean, don't
together.
Yeah. I appreciate that, Linda, because what I've discovered is, as I was saying at the beginning, people throw the term sustainability around, but no one's actually gone and said, "Oh, okay, well, what do we actually mean by that?" And so I wanted to take that step back. So I'm glad that was helpful. Thank you for that feedback.
So that was my point on green tariffs. So people think, tick a box, I've got a green tariff, and don't look any deeper. So your next step is, this is a green tariff, go and get one. Next step, how do we do it?
Yeah. And fair play to Gareth, he really does, look into it and try and make his home as green as possible. And it's definitely something, a lot of it is the convenience factor. Like you're saying, you're going from using the can shaving cream to back to, it's because the shaving cream is ready to go, right? It's much easier.
Yeah, exactly.
That kind of stuff. But it doesn't make it any worse or less, any worse as a product to be going back to the pods. So it's little things like that.
Yeah. Vern hit the nail on the head. Everyone thinks it's a massive ordeal. I'm probably that edge case, probably a bit like Joe, where we've gone a bit crazy and wild. But everyone can do their own little bit. It doesn't take much.
Advocate it, live by it, and I think that's the great thing to do.
And one of the things about this chat, I mean, yes, I wanted to educate going back, but completely aside from an education value for it. The fact that people are talking, like myself giving this talk or others giving a talk on sustainability, no matter what the topic is or the detail is, the fact that more people are talking about it raises the awareness of sustainability, and that in itself has a positive impact.
That is it. And I think it's a following on from there, and we should probably try and do something for UseCon in November.
I'd say I'll be well up for a follow-up, even like a bit of a deep dive if you can in some way.
Yeah. Am I getting sucked into something here? Am I getting sucked into something here that I feel it coming on?
25th of November, are you available? Because you really need to start planning that. But I think
I will commit to a follow-up session.
Yeah, I think still keep a high level for those who've obviously not seen this, but then go into, we'll meet with it for a broader audience. And I just think it will be, we're really looking to put more than just tech sessions on, as you've seen. We're really trying to support on the mental health side of things. We need to be very aware, working in the industry that we are, about sustainability and how we're contributing to climate change. And I think it's a really good topic.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
thanks for reaching out, putting it in front of us is good.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you had a slot available, and I'm looking forward to UserCon and being able to actually stand on a stage and speak to real people. Not that you're not all real people. I'd like to clarify.
To me, I think it's interesting to see how some of the background stuff. I mean, the organisation I work for are quite, financial services, right? So they're quite committed, or starting to see that green agenda trickling all the way down into everything. But you start to see it now, and I guess now it has some regulatory teeth behind it as well. It's now starting to inform who gets investment funds, for example.
Yeah.
And that's really what starts to drive behaviour, unfortunately, because that's the hard reality, the stick, as it were.
Well, you see, you know what? That's okay though, Simon, because I agree. It is the hard reality, and that is what drives it. But the fact is that is driving it, right? Like now, folks are starting to tune into the fact that there is a financial price to pay if you are not as sustainable as your neighbor or as your partner or as your competition. They're going to be selected before you because there's money that's associated with it, and that's what it takes to move it. So be it.
So I've got one from the VMware user group level. So if we go back to our home labs, go back 10 years ago, we had DL380s and we had some spinny rust racks and all the rest of it. You could probably look at £800 a month in electricity bills. I can see, people like Gareth who have got the home labs initiative, whatever, people are actually boasting about how many watts their SSDs and their NUCs and whatever are doing. We reduced our footprints just as a VMware user group to a fraction of what we were doing a decade ago. That really hits you in the pocket.
Yeah, well, you joke. I spin up parts of my lab when I need it. So I've got some higher end hosts when I need the performance. If not, you think of the NUCs. They are brilliant. They can consume as little as 15 watts versus 300-400. Keep going depending on what I've got loaded.
A DL380 is about 1.5 amps, roughly.
I've got a couple of shuttle servers, and so no fan. They just let the heat out through the metal base. Only 32 megs each, though, which is an issue. So I also have a Dell thing that sounds like small airplane taking off, and a couple of other Dell servers, which I generally don't ever turn on. But yeah, so ramping. I'm with you. Ramping stuff up as you need it.
Do you think that fits well with the hybrid cloud philosophy? Do you reckon more businesses will go that way? They'll have some stuff on-prem or premises, depending on, I'm going to get lynched, to then, bursting out to the cloud. Do you see that becoming a more standardized thing?
We have seen that already again, I'll speak to my history with VMware Cloud and AWS. We certainly have seen that. Some examples. So we were talking about telecom earlier. So 3 UK is everyone knows provider within the UK, and their story was that they had a bunch of developers and they needed infrastructure quick because everyone's on a race to 5G. And I'm not telling anything out of school here. They've gone at VMworld and spoken about this. And they had their developers lined up. They didn't have infrastructure. They desperately needed infrastructure, and their incumbent provider was going to take 3 months to provide the team with infrastructure. And I mean, the developers there, literally sitting there. And so this wasn't acceptable. And we had a chat with them around what VMware Cloud AWS could potentially do with them, have the right people at the table who understood the solution, who understood what we were trying to achieve. And 8 days later, they had their first SDDC stood up and the developers were working. Right. So that was a classic example of bursting through to cloud. And so, yeah, I do absolutely see. So, and that's just one example. So I absolutely do see more of that coming down the pipe.
Yeah, but I think particularly certainly working with a lot of the public cloud providers, right? Because that cost is now much more transparent and generally directly billed back to the business. I mean, I've certainly seen, for example, where in the old days, you could never switch off development systems because, they never knew, or they never knew the impact. And really, the reality of it is they never looked at what complexity it was, and it was someone else's problem buried in a budget line somewhere else. Now they're directly paying the cost of keeping those development servers up 24 hours a day. Yeah. And I see a lot more of those now being actually only spun up for 8 hours a day and actually proactively spun down at the end of the working day for those regions, because they are picking up and they see that direct bottom line rather than it being a financial shred across the whole organization.
Well, another example is when you have bursty traffic. So I work with IPTV, and the way it works is, you have a little bit during the day, the kids come home, there's a little bit of a spike, it goes down because they have their tea, a little bit as they go before bedtime. But 9 o'clock, when the kids are in bed, whoosh, on demand goes through the roof as mum and dad, it's 1 o'clock, let's put a movie on and just relax. So what you do is you use things like VROPS to trigger your load, spin it up in the cloud, do the demand from there, and then you do the fast up but slow down at midnight when everyone goes to bed. And it's better to hire your peak demand for 2 hours than run it in-house at peak for 24 hours a day. Save millions on one particular client. So hybrid,
and arguably, since we're on the topic of sustainability, arguably you're not using the power all that time, right? So it's not just a cost savings; it's an energy savings.
Yeah, only a 12th of the amount of power. Yeah.
And I'm seeing your note here. Put out a survey to UserCon, have people thinking about certain aspects of sustainability prior to. That's a good thought. Thank you.
That's Linda on the phone to her energy supplier now, doing a lower tariff.
So don't worry, I was going to say I'm offsetting you at the minute because I'm pushing 1.2 to the grid. So if you're
that's
pulling
right,
in,
so we're carbon neutral.
Yeah, I saw that.
So it's all right. I just oh no, now I'm pushing 2 to the grid, so you're fine.
Oh, sorry, the 1.1.
I'll spin my blades up. Hang on.
That's all right. It's creeping up. I'm up to 3.5 to the grid now. The sun's come back out. So I'm
I had heard. You can confirm this for me. So I had heard that energy companies are happy now, or this is perhaps a paradigm shift. They're happy to have you sustain yourself, but due to technical complications, they're not letting people push up to the grid or new new users pushing up to the grid. Is this true?
There's limits. It depends on the area. I originally the guys know my background here. I always wanted the system I had now, or very close. Originally, I was going to have close to, I think it was 12 kilowatts of solar. And my local grid just freaked out. Absolutely just threw kittens and went, no way in hell.
Why?
Because they were so scared that I was going to export loads. And believe it or not, it's kind of like a back pressure. Putting too much on the grid can then cost them money.
Okay.
The irony is they've now built 2 solar farms in my area and came back to us not so long back saying, are you sure you don't want the full amount now? I was like, yeah, sods. So I compromised and redesigned the system. So we have about 8.5 on the roof and we can peak. So at any peak, we can produce 6 safely to their terms. But then we've kind of proven to them, we again, go to the point of self-sustainability. Until we've gone to a recent tariff, most of the summer last year, we were running completely off grid. I'm pushing very little back to the grid. You know, we have smart chargers here that I can dump even more into the car. So at one point, I was generating 1 month. I think we did 1.2 megawatts in a month, and we only exported just shy of, I think it was about maybe 1,000 kilowatts of that. So less than a percentage of it I put back on the grid. The rest of that I dumped in cars. I used to heat my hot water. I used to run the house, and I consumed as much of that as I could.
And that's all solar?
And that's all solar. So shows that it can be done. It just takes a little bit of a mind shift.
Yeah, and again, I wonder about it at the cottage in Canada. The problem, of course, is the snow, right? And so it's going to get, especially since the cottage isn't used in winter, it's the panels are going to be covered with several feet of snow for most of the winter. And I don't know what that does from a damaging perspective or how things can be covered up. I'd have to do the investigation, obviously.
Well, use some of your stored electricity to heat the panels and melt it off.
Well, that's it. Some of the panels now do have a small element that kind of heats them off, you know. And again, that's why, you know, everyone says to me, you want to be 100% sustainable. I was like, no, that's kind of an unrealistic target, especially living in the UK and like Canada. We have rubbish weather. There is no way, even if I increase my rate, I'd be able to sustain myself during the winter. It's just not feasible. So I found that happy medium of having the battery that I can charge in, you know, low carbon times. So I can take it off the grid when it's low carbon, and then that can run the house when there's no solar. So it's again finding this mix of energy that works well for us. So, you know, there are points with the amount we export during the summer. I know that will probably have enough that is what I import back during the winter, you know, and it kind of balances out a bit, if that makes some weird and backwards.
No, that makes complete sense. Yeah, I sometimes do wonder. I mean, here in the UK, like when I look out the window now, so I'm in London. When I look out the window now and it's, you know, grayish, and I see, as we were driving back from Wales last week, you know, you see some solar farms along the where were we, the M4, and I think how does that work given the amount of time that it's overcast here? But apparently it does.
Yeah, mine's working right now, so it's fine. Who's up next, Simon? So I can make them co-host.
So we've got Gareth up next.
But most of the UK demand for electricity is during the day when it's sunny.
Well, folks, I unfortunately need to drop off. I would love to stay. Thank you all for being a great audience and not booing and hissing while we did the multiple stopping and restarting shares. I honestly did not see that coming.
At least you'll know for next time when you're going to.
I will know for next time. All right, folks. Thanks very much.
Thanks
so much, Ben. Take care.
Guys, you're all ready to go. You have the power.
I'm ready to go. Cool.
I think we've technically got 15 minutes yet, so we can.
Have we? I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
But at least we can test slides are working.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. It must be some, I don't know, some DRM policy with VMware Zoom.
I'll just check my slide deck, guys.
Sorry? So you got some time?
Yeah, no worries.
It's probably we had some policies like this. If it was that corporate meeting, you could do more stuff than you could if you're a guest on someone else's Zoom call.
Sure. There we go. Hopefully you can see that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. There we go. So let me just stop sharing and we'll start again. Assume we're okay to grab a quick coffee.
Yeah, so we've got 15 minutes technically till we kick off. So let's try and keep roughly on agenda. So yeah, if you want to grab a coffee or whatnot, that's cool.
Cool.
I'm probably going to do the same person.
very quiet here. Everyone's getting their coffee.
I'm just catching on the emails because I was spending the last hour there.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't want to drop out today. But
don't go away because you won't make it back.
Exactly. So, well, I would try to. It's just I don't want to bother the moderators to, let me in after I leave. Sometimes it can be in the middle of a session because not all lunchtimes and sessions are aligned, do they?
No, I know, and I'm just trying to do tweeting as well as the day job.
Yeah, it's that thing, in day jobs get in the way.
I know, I should take the day off really, properly should have done actually.
At least our time is more flexible. It's not 9 till 5. It's more like 9 till 9 and you do what you want when you want.
Yeah, the gaps in the middle. I don't know what you mean. I'm working solidly for those 12 hours. Yeah, you have to. I should be walking the dog. My husband's just taken him out for the first time in months, if not almost a year, because he has a bad back. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, it's either going to be a good one or he's going to come back going, that bloody dog on my back, blah, blah, blah. You need to train it better.
You don't train dogs, you train the owners.
Yeah, I know. I'm
but
always
they train the owners.
I do always take the blame for any of his behaviour. Bless him.
I used to work a dog, so the dogs know how to heel, they know how to hunt, they know how to retrieve, they know how to do whatever. You just then have to train the owner to work with the dog. Yeah,
just can't be whether they can be asked to work with you to make you happy and make you think you're in control. Yeah.
If you behave the right way to the dog, they see you as the alpha, and therefore they do the respect the pack. If you don't understand your dog, they get away with murder. Same with kids.
Well, it's true. He is trainable because he doesn't touch theirs. He doesn't go.
What, the husband?
Yeah. That is a lifetime project. We know that. And I didn't say challenge. I said project. Yeah, it's bless him. If only he wasn't 25 kilos, the dog. And then at least I'd look like I was vaguely in control.
You realise your husband is watching you on YouTube live.
Yeah, exactly. He's talking to the dog going, what bullshit are you talking about now? Oh man. But he has. It's been a pleasure having him during all the lockdown and COVID, though, it has to be said. I'm glad we got him a couple of years ago, rather than paying the fortune that a lot of people have been paying for puppies now.
Yeah, thousands for things like the Labradors, yeah.
Mm.
I just hope that, they are not just for COVID.
Yeah.
It might be.
It's updated, isn't it? Puppies are not just for Christmas.
Yeah.
Not just for COVID, because it will be September when everyone starts going back in more. Well, I say September, after the holidays. I reckon there will be more. People will realise they can't juggle it all, unless people are changing to the work from home.
Or dog minders. But they can charge a fortune per day.
Dog minders, Jesus, they are so busy around here.
Mm.
I need to do it though, just for the socialising for him. I think I might book him in a day a week.
Speaking of socializing, I think I speak for all when we say that I hope that we can do UK VMUG in person, or other conferences like London VMUG as well, of course, because that's pretty much your way to, if you're not going to be involved, it's our way to meet up as well. So looking for, I do miss that part of it as well a lot. Meeting you guys everywhere. So we didn't do VMworld either. So
no, I know.
The trouble with VMworld is it is free and you can join the sessions. But if you want to do the breakouts and actually meet people like we are here, you have to pay whether it is $100.
It's that, and plus, you are basically on the session together, so it's not the same feeling as well because you're not typically not meeting each other, right? Unless you do a separate Zoom yourself. But at VMworld, when you're in person there, then obviously you sit in the common areas, so our VM village and all that. And you just about, don't you? Yeah, and And it's random, typically, and you know where everyone, well, particular people are going to be. So you go there, you have a chat, and you attend your sessions. It's a nice mix of things. So it naturally happens, and you don't realize it until it's gone. So for 2 years we've not been doing it. So now you feel it more.
True. Very, very true. Just going to retweet.
But yeah, you're right that that session, the cost of it, it's not a huge amount. The company should be paying for it, I guess, but some don't.
But it's hard to make a business case to say I want to go into a breakout room to actually chat to some of the round tables and things. They say, where's the value over that?
Well, that's mainly what you get from VMworld, isn't it? And then show them what value it is compared to going to a hotel and sending you away and everything like that. It's peanuts, really, isn't it?
What's a hotel again?
Well, yeah, what is a hotel again?
I've done one of those for about 18 months.
Stayed in one a couple of weekends ago when we went up to London. And it was really, it was just weird, really weird being in a public place like that, staying in a hotel, well, having the kids and the husband with me for a start, because normally I'm just off jaunting for work. But yeah, but now I've done it, I'm feeling much more confident about having been out in London, doing the whole outdoor thing. You can socialize fully outdoors.
I've got to get on a train next week to go up to London to meet some of the team for a meeting. It'll be my first time on a train for about 3 years because I drive to my customers. Yeah. And I think it's the first time in London for 2 years. It's going to be very weird.
Really weird. And we went on the tube. We drove to Richmond and then got on the tube. And what's hilarious is that you're supposed to wear masks, aren't you, on public transport? And there were these younger gentlemen, on the tube, and you know they weren't wearing masks, but this, and I kid you not, this Indian guy coughed further down the carriage. The lot of them saved their lives. I was just, what are you? Just like, he's an Indian, he's coughing. What? It's not a stereotypical Delta variant must come from. It was just so ridiculous. Wear your mask, get on with it. Doesn't matter who's coughing. But I just thought it was so funny the way they immediately whooshed onto their sweatshirts.
And for how long? For the entire journey? Because those will be there for, I don't know, hours or something, right? So you can't just keep doing that.
Just a millisecond.
Yeah. So after that, it's all going in again. So what's the point of doing it?
That's the whole point. Exactly. They thought about it. It showed it was on their mind, though. They don't giving it all confidence, not wearing a mask or whatever else, but it showed it still played on their mind. The fact that their immediate reaction was to do that. I'm just going to be a mask wearer in public places, full stop. Nah, could just save my mental health for that, I think. I feel more comfortable with it. Oh.
Yeah, I think there's loads of fun to be had now, just coughing randomly on the tube and seeing what the reaction is.
Unless the guy's got a taser in his hand.
Are you back now? Are you still 4G?
I'm still on my mobile, yes. They won't fix it until 3 p.m. apparently.
So
well, I'm surprised because you used to be able to tether and make phone calls at the same time, but it seems you can now, which is cool.
So how do they know 3 p.m.? Is it the guy cutting trees that's
yeah,
yeah, I wouldn't have to go with no. That's versions. They've acknowledged there is a fault now, so that's always good. So it'll probably be fixed by next week sometime.
Plausible culpability.
Indeed. Well, last time my broadband failed was about 3 years ago when they were installing broadband specifically for a customer down the road, and mine stopped working at the same time. And then they had to come out and run an entirely new cable, which took them 3 weeks.
Well, yeah, I've got the unlimited SIM as backup on mine, so yeah. Luckily, the backup SIM's on 4G, so I'm getting 50, 60 meg off it, but I don't want to drop that low.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's not too bad. I mean, this is gift gas, so it's all right, unlimited. Right, so we're pretty much about quarter past. Where are we now? Are you good to go, Gareth?
Yeah, good to go. So I'll just share my screen. One moment. Okay, hopefully you can all see my presentation and the slide deck. So firstly, following on from this morning's conversations, croeso, prynhawn da, or welcome and good afternoon. I thought we'd get a bit of Welsh in on the slide deck. So what we'll be discussing really in the next 45 minutes, it's kind of a lot to cover, but an upgraded sort of slide deck and discussion around microsegmentation, this time utilizing vRealize Network Insight and NSXT. But this is sort of an updated version of previous VMUG presentations where the sessions have revolved around NSX for vSphere and the built-in application rule manager that has. But we'll be focusing, as I say, on Network Insight and NSXT data center today to try and microsegment applications. So in terms of what we'll cover then in the next 45 minutes, essentially an overview of microsegmentation, what the cell is, what we try to get to as a goal, and then we'll have a quick discussion around the reality and the fact that despite all these wonderful tools, to truly implement zero trust within an environment is a little bit more challenging than simply click a button and it's done overnight. So we'll discuss that. We then look at application discovery, so utilizing Network Insight, how we can visualize the traffic flows and applications dependencies, specifically around challenges with zero documentation or lack of understanding around an application. And then we'll jump into the lab, which is whirring behind me. And I think the room I'm in at the moment is it's got to be pushing 30. So it's rather balmy and nice and warm, this sauna. So we'll jump in and we'll actually utilize NSXT and the data gathered from Verni to segment or microsegment an application so we can lock it down nicely. And then we'll have a bit of a discussion if there's time at the very end. So, okay, so let's, before we really get going, let's quickly introductions. My name is Gareth Lewis. I'm a senior consultant at Extrovert, specializing in cloud networking and security, and specifically NSX. IT for nearly 20 years, VMware products for 11, and VMware NSX, really before it was NSX, back in the vCloud networking and security days, back in 2013. The expert NSX and Pro as of this year. So I joined Gareth into the Pro team, which is great. And then various social media links there. If this session is of interest, then please do reach out and we can again chat about challenges and ways forward if you've got any queries there. So okay, microsegmentation, right? It's been talked about for years now, and what is it? How do we do it? We'll cover that in the next few minutes. But essentially, I think to visualize what microsegmentation is or can be, I think this slide really still holds its own. So we talk about houses versus hotels, and specifically around the controls that we place or used to place around our network. Simply used to exist with perimeter firewalls. Okay, we used to have some controls within the perimeter, such as OS firewalls. But generally, if there was a breach, it could be seen as generally easy to traverse the network there and move laterally inside the perimeter. Whereas then we look at the sort of hotel approach where, we're allowed into the lobby and really from there you need specific access or controls to reach maybe back of house and certainly the floors and absolutely the hotel rooms themselves. So generally much more, I think, a microsegmented approach and we can visualize that looking at that houses versus hotels. Now, the reality, unfortunately, is microsegmentation itself should be easy, right? But more often than not, I think the biggest challenge that I find with customers is generally IT and by design, right? We don't have that deep ingrained understanding of how an application works, what its dependencies are. And we're IT, right? We're operations. We don't need to care about that. We've got application teams, we've got development teams, we've got public vendors, and of course they all offer fantastic documentation around the firewalling requirements, and just generally the application itself. In reality, not so much. There are some big vendors out there that, you know, kind of struggle with this, and certainly internal teams also struggle. So how then really are we supposed to microsegment our applications? How are we supposed to understand how our applications work and what virtual machines, what services, what applications make up that wider application if we don't have the documentation? Well, okay, enter vRealize Network Insight, right? So in the network insight sort of world, we don't really need documentation, but we still need an understanding of how an application should work and really what ports, protocols, services those systems require to access in order to work. Everything else we should be able to drop, and the application should continue to work. Okay, so although we say that we don't need documentation, I think we still need to work with those application owners, those development teams, to ensure that we have a better, wider understanding of how the application works. But then network insights, if we just jump to the next slide, you know, so what is it? Okay, so by essentially using network insight, we can essentially better understand our applications. So network insight allows us to visualize the traffic flows of the applications themselves. And then in this session, what I want to demonstrate is how we can, one, automate the discovery of our applications so that we can then in turn interrogate and analyze the collected data flows. But then we can also use network insight to, by having identified the analyzed and collected data flows, we can then implement microsegmentation by utilizing NSXT data center. Okay, so via the two products, they hugely complement each other. So if we move on then, so first of all, we need to, you know, define our applications, okay, or discover them. And there's several sort of options we have to do that within Network Insight, and I'll show you this in more detail in the demo shortly. So first up, obviously, we can simply manually define an application, but then we have dynamic implementations as well. Okay, so we can discover applications, for example, leveraging vSphere tags and/or custom attributes, but we can also discover applications utilizing VM naming convention, for example. Lastly there, which I won't be covering today, is we can integrate it, or we can integrate Network Insight with CMDB, such as ServiceNow, but I won't be covering that today. So we've got numerous options there, plenty, and obviously there are pros and cons for both, or all of those options. So then I'll just run through the options very quickly, and then we'll jump into the lab to show you this firsthand. But simply to add an application manually, we simply click the option to do so, and then we can sort of define what we want makes up that application. Okay, so this would obviously work for smaller applications where the documentation is either very good or maybe the application is made up of a very small subset of systems or VMs. So we simply give the application a name, we define the tiers, and in this application, we've simply got a database tier, which I define here in the middle box as DB. I add in, so I can actually select the virtual machines, because this Network Insight is obviously integrated with vCenter Server. So we can simply choose the infantilized VMs, which make up that database tier, and then I can add additional tiers. In this case, I'll simply add a web tier and select the relevant VM that makes up that tier as well. Once done, we're given a nice visual schematic of the application itself. Once it's had time to collect the data flows, we're given a nice visual as to what actually connects to what, and we can delve into that information to actually analyze those data flows in readiness for microsegmentation. Application option 2, rather, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, we can utilize vSphere tags and or custom attributes. So again, I've got a couple of virtual machines here which have been assigned custom attributes, and they've been configured with an application name and a tier within. So again, then this will filter through into Network Insight. We can click Discover Applications, and then we can sort of build out that definition criteria, whereby the application is defined by the custom attribute that we've defined within vSphere, and likewise the tiers are also assigned the custom attribute. Once we hit the discover button, that will go off and find our applications or discover them. From the screenshot in front of you, we can see 4 have been discovered. Okay, we can see the VM names that sort of make up that wider application. Okay, so in application 001, for example, we've got a database server and a web server, nice and simple. Okay, so when we hit close and we hit save, we have our 4 applications saved. But of course, option 2, that comes with a managerial overhead, right, or an administrative overhead, whereby first of all, we need to create the vSphere custom attributes or tags, and we have to assign them. So what we can do is option 3, we can essentially utilize a virtual machine naming convention. Now, I understand these can change, you know, almost sort of monthly, depending on whether we get new staff, new ideas about VM naming conventions, all that nice stuff. But generally, you'll have some naming conventions within an organization that you can use to discover these applications. Okay. So again, we hit discover. Now we're looking at names. And what we will use is the Network Insight pattern builder to build out the regular expression to define our applications. And in this example, I've called up a virtual machine that I have in my environment. Okay, so it's got the application name in the first sort of segment, then the web segment, or the role segment, sorry. In this case, this is web, and then the iterative number there. Now, the first section here, as I've said, defined in my environment the application name. So that's nice and simple for myself. But what we've got here, you can see the 4 applications that it's rediscovered from the previous option I showed you. But I've also got a number of virtual machines within my environment that utilize, although the similar sort of naming convention, they offer, they provide a different role. Okay, so we've got VGL for V. Gareth Lewis, that all starts there. And we've got infrastructure stuff. Okay, and likewise, I've got Veeam backup or application stuff within my environment. So again, it's called them up. That's fine, because all we're doing at this point is defining the criteria to define an application. So we hit submit, then we progress on to defining the tiers, again, via the pattern builder. And in this case, in my environment, the second segment after the dash is simply web. Okay, so in this case, it's a web tier, but we're defining where in the naming convention the role or the tier is defined. And likewise, again, it's found the applications, it's found the tiers within the applications, but it's also found other environments within my, or rather other systems or tiers within my environment that it thinks or matches the criteria that we're building out. And again, no problem with that, because we're going to choose which applications we want to absorb into the environment. So after clicking submit and discover, we're shown the applications again. Much like the previous slide, I think this is less work, really. I mean, if you've got naming convention in place, what you don't need to do is create those custom attributes or tags and actually manually assign them. There are, you know, it's more of a helpfully dynamic process, I think, to defining your applications. But there are options, there are flavors of defining these applications. Some work better than others in some environments. And as I say, some work better for some customers than others also, but you've got the options there to leverage. So then once our applications are defined and we sort of built out the dependencies of that wider applications, then we really need to delve on and dive into the data flows and the traffic flows that this will identify. So we're showing an overview of most of our applications. Okay, we're given nice visuals that then we can sort of export into reports and nice reports for the management. That's all good stuff. And we can see here that our database tier has 1 virtual machine. Likewise, the web has 1 virtual machine. Both talk to the internet. That's interesting in itself. Again, we'll take a look at those traffic flows in a moment. We've got this other sort of unrecognized box here. Again, we'll identify that. And we've got shared physical infrastructure that both access. But the important one here is we can see database servers talking to web servers and vice versa. So again, this is really helpful good information that we need now to sort of build out our rule sets in readiness for our NSXT distributed firewall rules. So what Network Insight gives us is the famous Verney donut. Okay, so we can utilize this to, again, visualize the traffic flow. So we can see between the database tier and the web tier, we can see web is hitting database, and it's also hitting the internet, shared services, other stuff as well. And by clicking into these, we're then shown our flows. And this is the real important area of Network Insight, certainly from a microsegmentation approach, because we're shown these nice ports, and we'll look at this live in the lab in a few moments. Essentially, what we've got here, you can see we've got an internal management address, or an internal subnet address, sorry, to my network. So that's trusted. We're hitting the web server via port 443. Great, we expect to see that. It's a web server. Likewise, we can see the web server here is trying to talk to the database server here on port 3306. Again, fantastic. That's what we expect to see, the web server accessing the MySQL database on the database server. But then, interestingly, we've got the web server itself trying to hit an IP address in Zurich via port 123. Now, yeah, okay, this is an out-of-the-box appliance, and it's probably been configured to access NTP via a range of public servers, but not what we want, okay? So we'll, by design, in a moment when we jump into the lab, we will block that by design, okay? So what we're going to do is only allow the ports that we know we need. Anything else is going to get dropped. So what Network Insight will give us as well is, based on the flows, it will recommend firewall rules, okay? Now, again, this Network Insight is sort of firewall agnostic, okay? It's not designed to specifically integrate and import rules into NSX. We can utilize this for physical firewalls, other branded virtual firewalls, and of course, the VMware ecosystem NSX. So, for example, what we have here, we've got web talking to the internet via 123, as we said. Okay, so we don't want that, so I've unticked it. Web to DB for MySQL, great, we want that. Physical to web on 443, their web servers, again, fantastic. That's what we'd expect. And we've got other stuff here, like web servers trying to access other physical devices via DNS. Now, I've already got rules stored within the distributed firewall of NSX, so we won't need to do any exporting with that. Now, what we can do, and I won't be covering this in this session, but we've essentially got the ability to export all of this information to either CSV or XML, and then utilizing a Python script, we can do an automated import. But remember, everything we see here isn't necessarily valid or innocent. Okay, we need to have that deeper understanding of the application, work with the application owners, the developers and vendors to make sure that we're only implementing the firewall rules that we require. Everything else should be dropped. Okay, so don't just take it as a pinch of salt and as given that everything needs to be allowed. There needs to be an element of visual inspection to validate and approve these rules. So, as I mentioned, we can utilize this to build out our NSXT distributed firewall rules. And again, we'll jump into the lab in a moment to show you this in detail. But essentially what we've got is a two-tier application, okay? So we know from the documentation that we do have, the ports needed obviously are 443 to the web server, okay? The web server needs to talk to the database server over port 3306. And then other than that, we're unsure, okay? So what we want to do is leverage Network Insight to ensure that the application doesn't break as soon as we implement a sort of per application zero trust model, okay? Now, what I'll do, I'll just switch screens a moment and we'll just jump into Network Insight just to show you the application. So 2 seconds, let me reshare. So hopefully you can see my next screen. We're in Network Insight. And this is an application that I've already discovered. So I've got one application here. Again, it's a small lab environment, which today is creating more heat than I'd like, but that's fine. Wish this was in winter. turn the heating off. So when we get into the application itself, as I said, we'll take a real look now at the application and the flows within it. Okay, so we're given when it loads, we're given a number of nice visuals again that we can use for either reporting or to actually interrogate the traffic flows. Okay, so again, I can see we've got one virtual machine here, which is our Web 01, and likewise in the database tier, I've got the DB server as well. Okay. And we can see things are accessing the internet. We can see things are accessing shared physical systems. That's all great, and that's what we expect to see. But let's delve a little deeper then. If I expand microsegmentation, again, we've got the donut, the network insight donut. And by hovering over certain things, I can see, okay, so my web tier is accessing the database tier, and we can see the flows here and follow them through. Likewise, it's trying to access the internet, shared services, and all that good stuff. Okay, so we can start now to delve a little deeper. Now, we'll be spending a huge amount of time on Network Insight and what else it can do. This is just one small section or feature of Network Insight. Again, if we'd like to know more, then I've got some links at the very end, or feel free to reach out and we can have a deeper chat around all things Network Insight. So let's look at the flows then for the web tier. And again, we'll utilize and use these flows to validate, analyze, and then eventually create our distributed firewall rules. So again, this is a lab environment. This is running right now. We're hosting essentially a WordPress blog. Okay, so this is the web front end. This is Web 01, and the database server itself is DB01. Okay, both live within vSphere. Simple two-tier, 2 VM solution. But again, we need to lock this down as part of a new security posture. Okay, so essentially we're given 16 flows. Again, it's a small environment, small application, and again, Web 01 is trying to talk to DB01 on port 3306. Awesome, that's what we expect to see. We've got some maybe unknowns that as IT guys and girls we would really need to do a bit of research on. So we've got Web 01 here trying to talk to something in the US via port 443. Might want to look into that. We might want to validate and approve it. Now, this is actually WordPress. This is actually one of the WordPress servers utilized for updates. So again, I've validated and approved that. But again, this might be an internal web server. We might want to fully lock that down for no external access, which we will by design in a few moments. Again, we've got another WordPress database, a WordPress public server there. We've got something trying to talk to something in London. Don't trust that one, so we're going to block that by default. We've got DNS and domain services. We've got something in Ashburn, US. Again, we won't allow that. Then we've got 123s and all that nice stuff. Okay. And as I mentioned in an earlier slide, we're given the recommended firewall rules. Okay. Now, again, recommended, is that the right word? It could be misconstrued slightly. You know, we don't take these as valid instantly, and we certainly won't be creating the distributed firewall rules based on these. So really what we're going to take from this is, okay, we need to allow any source to our web servers via port 443. We certainly want to allow web to the database tier to speak over 3306 or MySQL, and anything else we may want to block. Okay, so we've got others coming in over port 22. Again, it's a web server, SFTP, for example, appliance management via SSH, all good stuff. So again, we might want to create those. As I mentioned, port 53 or DNS, then great. Our internal systems all have access to DNS, so that's counted for already. But there's other things like 123 to public sources we might want to block. Obviously, our infrastructure has our own NTP servers, and we just might want to reach out to the developers or vendors to ask what's going on here. Okay, so again, all awesome information that we can use, we can write reports around, and we can present to either the application owners and to the developers. Okay, so we know what we want to do. How do we do it? Okay, so if we just jump over to NSX, it's almost timed me out. What I want to do first of all is just do a bit of admin to sort of group up essentially some inventory items. Okay, so what I've done already, I've created a number of security groups essentially, and these are, so we've got the application name that we've identified via Network Insight. Okay, application T001 that identifies the tenant, and then we've got the application A001, which is the application 01. Just jump back here. What I've created is a group of all servers. Okay, now the definition for this is a virtual machine with a name starting with T001, A001. So again, nice dynamic group that any other servers get added within vSphere, they'll be added to these rules automatically. Likewise, for the database servers, again, a rule starting virtual machine starts with T001, A001-DB, and likewise for web-web. Okay, so again, if we want to scale out these applications, increase the number of web servers, for example, database backend servers, we can, and we can automatically or dynamically add these servers to these groups by using these dynamic naming conventions. So all good. What we can do then is utilize these groups within our firewall rules. Okay, so if we just jump into security and distributed firewall. So what have we done? We've utilized Network Insight to identify the rules that we need. As I say, we can automate the import of the firewall rules and the distributed or the security groups via a Python script. I won't cover that in today's session, mainly because there's an element of what can go wrong, okay? And as I'm running a live demo, I thought we'd be best to do that manually. But a couple of links at the end of the slide deck, which I'll share, and which do cover that in one of my earlier blog posts. So that gives you all the information there as well. So to give you a bit of background, we've got a number of rules in place already. So we've got domain services, we've got infrastructure services for testing and all that nice stuff. So we've got NTP, AD, and DNS, and we've got ICMP as well. Now, what by default NSX will do, we sort of come at this using a default connectivity strategy, and that's what earlier versions of NSX used to call this, or NSXT used to call this. But now the default strategy is what we class as blacklist, or as the blacklist option. Okay, so essentially we want to deny traffic because we have a default any allow rule. So essentially anything that lives within this environment is allowed to talk. And for myself, and in this environment, we can class it as maybe a brownfield environment. We onboard applications and services, and we allow them to continue to talk as normal. And by onboarding them, we haven't broken them. Okay, so by essentially flipping this to drop, we would effectively break any application that lives on there unless it's got the whitelisted rules already set up. But what we can do now, we can start to build out our policy and our firewall rules. Okay, so we'll come back to this blog in a moment. You can see it still works. We can jump into the post. We can see we've got a load of test text in there. Generally, we can jump around the website. It all works all nice. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll just jump back to NSX and we'll create a new policy. And we'll call it T001, 8001. And underneath this, we'll begin to flash out our rules. Okay, so what I'll do first of all, because we're effectively creating a per application microsegmentation or zero trust on a per application basis, what I'll do first of all is I will create deny rules. So I'll create an inbound deny. So that's essentially any source to our all servers. So when these are the groups that I created earlier that now I can utilize. So I'm going to create a deny inbound, so any source to any of our servers on any service, and I'm going to apply that to all of our servers, okay, all of our application servers, and I'm going to drop that traffic. Likewise, I'm going to create a deny outbound from any of our application servers on any service, and I'm going to apply that to those servers as well, and we're going to drop traffic. Now, there's our sort of per application zero trust, right? Again, it's a brownfield environment. If this was greenfield and we were maybe onboarding applications, we already have the whitelist rules in place, great. But this is another way, another option that we can look at it on a per application basis. Because again, overnight, we're not going to onboard things and to deny all traffic to all applications. In a real world, we might want to onboard per application by application by application. So while these rules propagate to all of my ESXi hosts, we'll just give it a second, success there. So now if we drop back to the blog and hit refresh, that now is simply going to timeout. Okay, nice and simple. You'll have to take my word for it. We'll come back to that in a moment when it's timed out. In the interest of time, if I now start to flesh out the firewall rules, we will add a couple and we'll build these out. So we already know that web tier needs to talk to the database tier. So for this, the source will be one of our VM groups. We've got web servers here. So I'll add that. And as I said, that needs to talk to the database servers. Nice and simple. Okay, now we might want to, in the future, add additional tiers. Okay, so as opposed to applying it to all servers, what I'm going to do, I'm going to apply it to both web and database. We may want to create in the future more tiers. So by applying it to all servers may in the future actually have a negative impact. Okay, and the service obviously I need to add to this rule is MySQL. It's to query the backend database. So when our services list loads, we will either search for MySQL or 3306. There it is. Apply that there, and we'll set it to allow. But for the moment, I'm just going to disable this rule because I'll show you one thing in a moment. And then lastly, we need some sort of web connection from the outside world. Okay, so we'll just say public to web. Okay, so that's any source. Now, obviously, if it's an internal application or indeed an external application, you might want to be a bit more granular in the source. For the lab environment, any is fine. This will be trying to access our web server group. Again, nice and dynamic. So if we scale out these web servers, we've got the option there to, we don't need to essentially amend any of these firewall rules. That's a web server, so nice and simply, we need 443, but because it's might be utilizing port 80 as well, in this case, we'll search for HTTP. And we'll just add both services. In this example, we are only referencing the web servers, so I will apply that to the web servers. So effectively what we've built out, okay, is a per application firewall policy. So effectively what we're doing by default is implementing zero trust around this specific application, okay? So we're denying any traffic from the outside world to all of the servers, and likewise, all of the servers cannot talk to any other server by these two drop rules, okay? And then above this, we add our whitelist rules. So the web database, the web tier can talk to the database tier over MySQL. Perfect. We've identified that in Network Insight, and we've also identified that the access to the web servers needs to be via ports 80 and 443. What I'm going to do to start with, I'm just going to disable the web to DB tier, and I'm just going to publish this. So what effectively we're allowing is web access to the web server. But just as an example here that, you know, this isn't pre-recorded, I'll effectively go back to my web application. It's doing a refresh here. Might take a second because these rules are propagating to the databases. Stop that and refresh. I've only tested this a few hundred times, and today it tends to go slow. Of course it does. Let me just check these. So we've got any source to our web servers on ports for HTTP and HTTPS. We've applied that to the web servers and we've set it to allow. Do one more refresh. Let's launch it in a new tab. The demo gods are obviously not on my side today.
It's my fault tempting fate, I'm afraid, Gareth.
I know. What's going on? Oh, we might have to come back to this one, I think.
Did you hit publish? Or did I miss that?
Yeah, publish is done. I think I know what it is. So that's going to time out, apologies. That's going to time out anyway, but in a moment, what we should see, and this is by design, right? I've not enabled the rule. So what we're seeing is traffic trying to hit the web front end. Now it's actually doing that, but in a moment we'll see it time out, and the web front end is going to report back that it can't communicate with its database. So there's me being all worried and flustering. And of course, by design there, we've got our web server actually talking back to us. So I broke my own rule and rushed, and there we go. Okay, so we know web services are up, but of course, because of the web tier to database tier, we are essentially still down. But again, we've proven and proved that web services are up. So now by enabling access between the web and the database tier itself, again, we'll just wait to show success. Now, when we refresh it, we're back into the web application or the WordPress application, and we can again browse around. Okay, and we're back. So essentially what we would then want to do is maybe implement another few rules, maybe for appliance management, SSH, SFTP, things like that, okay? And we'll build that up as we go based on what Network Insight has told us here. Now, on larger scale operations, that might not be as quick and easy. Also, there are other tools out there that do work directly with NSXT, such as NSX Intelligence. Again, it's kind of Network Insight made turbo. And again, that will integrate fully with NSXT so that those rules can be created quite dynamically. But again, it's worth noting that you'll always need some form of validation checks, okay, in generally conjunction with the network security teams. So let's just jump back to the slide deck. Still nicely on time, so just close up in a moment. I think I've got about 7 minutes left. Hopefully you can see the slide deck once again. So essentially what we implemented within that scenario, we utilized Network Insight, right, to analyze the collected firewall rules, analyzed the collected data and traffic flows. We identified a number of ports. We identified several ports which weren't valid, or we identified as not valid, or certainly that we wouldn't want to allow, such as public NTP access, public queries to port 80 to servers in different continents. Those would be locked down by design by those default inbound and outbound deny rules. And we essentially allowed port 443 access to the web server and the required access from web to DB servers over port 3306. So then, in conclusion, and if there are any questions, obviously we've got a few minutes left, but in conclusion, again, it comes down to understanding your applications, okay? We still need that manual understanding. Talk to your application owners, talk to your developers and software vendors for that critical documentation, because at the end of the day, using Network Insight will sort of visualize the traffic flows, but what it won't do is tell you whether that is innocent or not. Okay, you actually have to do some validation checks in conjunction with your development teams and your security teams to validate those traffic flows. And if this loads, next slide. As I mentioned earlier, diolch I bawb, Michael diwrnod gwych. Well, thank you, everyone, and have a great day. A few pieces of resources and further reading there. As I mentioned, back towards the end of last year in December, I wrote a 6-part sort of article, which naturally flowed into part 1, 2, 3 around network insight. Sort of went down pretty well. As I mentioned, part 6 there was about importing the recommended firewall rules from Network Insight into NSX via Python script. And again, a big shout out there to Martin Smith, who kind of wrote the book on the subject, right? So that is available for either purchase, download, and it's well worth a read if you are interested in utilizing Network Insight, because it covers such a broad range of features of Network Insight. Today we've really played with just the tip of the iceberg on one area, I suppose. So again, if that is of interest, brilliant. Feel free to take a look at the blog post series. Also, on Twitter, also Martin Smith on Twitter, absolutely fantastic resource there. And a shout out there again, as Simon mentioned this morning, around VMUG Advantage, because if these are technologies or products that you're interested in playing with, then either via vExpert programs or VMUG Advantage, you can sort of really spin them up in your lab and really get to grips and play with these products as well. So thank you very much again, Linda, Simon, the guys, Gareth. Thanks for the invite as well, and it's been great to chat to you today.
No worries. Thanks, Gareth. That was really good. So, I mean, we've got a bit of time. So, do we have any questions for Gareth?
Can I ask you a question, Gareth?
Yes, Rick, of course.
So, going back to one of your earlier slides, you had a diagram with the physicals in there, really near the beginning. So, physicals, is that with the guest agent on it? And how does that interact with NI? And what about when things come from outside your, let's call it private cloud, if you're just, say, coming from another VPC or something? How do you deal with those things that are external, like your physicals and separate VPC?
So depending on your licensing type, then you can actually license some physical kit as well. Switches, for example, so you can track the flow across your physical environment also. But generally, yeah, we call out physical kit. Yeah, we can generally identify those based on IP across the network. Have you got a scenario sort of in mind that you'd sort of?
Oh yeah, we got things like I don't know, your critical national infrastructure people that have, let's call it politely, legacy equipment, which is on air-gapped physical tin that's been there for decades and they can't switch off. So they want to put a guest agent on it. So they are resisting putting it into the virtualized world, and we still have to put microseg to those devices. That's one.
Yeah. So of course, yeah, you'd look at those via IP, and then maybe you could integrate those into NSXT. Via agents if you want to. That's a good discussion. Let me put a few thoughts around that and I'll come back to you with a few thoughts.
Because the guest agent's quite new, isn't it? It's only been out a couple of minor versions.
Yeah, the guest agent I've not worked with in the past, but yeah, all the documentation is there ready for it. So let me delve into that and all.
I've been had a quick read, but it seems it's quite a nice idea that you can include those horrible physically things into your rule sets.
And they're always going to exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're always going to exist, right? We're not 100% virtual yet. We're never going to be, but try as we might.
I've even walked into a room where a physical box had yellow tape, the ribbon. Tape, diagonal tape around it, saying "Do not cross this line," sort of thing. It's like, why is that? Because we can't buy spare parts for it anymore.
Yeah, can't afford for it to break down. Yeah.
So
presumably the guest agents, it's a similar approach used if you've got stuff running in one of the public cloud providers.
Sorry, Simon, what was that again?
Yeah, I was going to say, if you've got VMs running in, I don't know, Azure or AWS or whatever, but native VMs, the guest agent presumably is the approach you use there.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and the trouble is when you have VPCs in different areas, unless you've got federated NSXT, you don't know about them. So I haven't come across a solution for that yet.
Cool. Okay, thanks, Gareth. That was really interesting. Can you maybe we got the recording actually, so the slides are in the recording. But I mean, if you're able to share the slides, it might be useful as well.
Of course, yeah, happy to.
Cool. Brilliant. Okay, right. So that puts us actually on time for our lunch break, as well. So it's a bring your own lunch affair, I'm afraid. So, but if you want to turn your cameras on, it looks like I've actually got an internet connection again now. So I'm just going to disconnect for a little bit and switch myself over or back to a permanent connection. And, but, if you guys want to hang around, we'll be around for the next hour. So we're looking to sort of kick off again at 2 p.m. With Robbie's session. But as I say, we'll all be around in the meantime if you want to have a chat.
Thank you, Gareth. Sorry, I
cursed.
This is where we switch over to Sam Gowan to talk about sandwiches again.
Oh, sandwiches. I've had mine.
He made everyone hungry last time, didn't he?
Well, I'm waiting for baby girl to make an appearance and see how she's grown and how she can take over his work area. Catherine, what are you doing for your birthday? Are you there or not?
Yeah, sorry, it's just stuffing myself face with violence.
What are you going to do today? Are you doing anything tonight for your birthday?
No, nothing at all. It's my mum's birthday tomorrow. I was her 30th birthday present one day early. So, no, the family's getting together in a couple of weeks, hopefully, for the first time in absolutely ages, but no, nothing planned.
It's tricky, isn't it? It is tricky. I'm pacing myself for anything social, just in case in between. But getting quite a lot of people with out of office being sick at the moment. I think it's colds going around as much as anything, not just the evil disease.
Well, that's why the social we've got is next week. It's after the 19th. You can actually meet your actual team members in 3D.
Are you going to wear masks? Controversial.
Yeah, anonymous.
Stay away. They were talking. Who was saying about it? Simon, I think, was saying about whether you're going to hug and stuff when you meet up.
Cautiously.
They're talking about wearing coloured bracelets, aren't they? Plus, like the bands.
What, double jab?
Coloured bands to say whether you're comfortable. Can you imagine? It'd be like,
I'm going to wear hazard tape all over me that says, "Do not come close, do not touch." Stay.
Do it as a bow tie.
It's funny. I think there's actually more colds going around this time.
Yeah.
Because I think they said basically because a lot of the kids particularly had been at home for so long, all of the kind of coughs and sneezes and typical things. Yeah, and now all saved up and going into one. I mean, just our own kids have been, have a couple of pretty horrible colds at least 2 or 3 times since they've gone back, which is normally you'd kind of spread it across the year.
That's the little petri dishes.
Oh.
Well, a bit older, but yeah, my 2 have had colds the past 2 weeks. Girl had it first, then Rudy, but they do turn it around so quickly.
The worst one is winter vomiting virus because they get better, go back to school, and then 3 days later they come back again, and they get 3 in a row. We're down to only a third of the class ever being there at one time.
I think half of my daughter's year are currently out through isolation, or because of COVID, or colds and whatnot. But I think she said she turned up for I don't know, one of her lessons the other day, and there were 2 of them in it. It was her and the teacher. But she obviously really enjoyed the attention.
Are you sure that they are not hacking the
homework?
Are you sure that they're not hacking the system and creating those false tests?
False reports. Yeah.
I could see a lot of people going, it's 2 weeks to the end of term. So if I have to isolate for 10 days, I actually get an extra. Well, I'm sure people don't do that and they're professional, but yeah.
Have you seen how many are off? They reckon, what is it? 10,500 kids off school at the moment.
Yeah, but in case you haven't heard or seen it, I think there was a link somewhere as well that where kids are putting some juice onto the LFT. Well, sorry, not LFT, the rapid tests, and it comes up as infected.
Really?
Deodorant. Yes, deodorant. You can spray deodorant, it makes it do it. My son was telling me the other day.
And obviously, when that comes up, there you register yourself as infected, and then that person, that kid, and obviously everyone around in the bubble have to isolate. So they're doing it deliberately. So some have actually come up with that hack. Goes to show how clever they are, right? I haven't tested it myself, but must be working.
Yeah.
It's
whereas I think we have the opposite. I think one of my daughters, because my daughter's a secondary school, so she has to do the lateral flow test, whatever it is, twice a week.
Twice a week, yeah.
And she literally had a whole pack of tests. They were all duds, because they come up with the no result or whatever it is, or error.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like literally a whole pack of duds. In the end, because I thought
poor thing.
I thought she was making it up, and I went and got one out of a different pack and made her do that, and that worked. Yeah, she really enjoyed that.
I bet she did. Oh man.
Yeah, we were having to do that as well twice a week. So far so good. So, but
exactly. There was one of the kids. Talking about faking the result. One of the kids did a fake positive and phoned in and reported himself to school. His parents knew nothing about it until they got the email saying, because he's got blah 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 blah, we need to. And she's like, why isn't he at school? And they're like, well, because he's positive. No, he's not. He was back in school, but all those kids got isolated, and so then it was a case of, sorry, it was a false report. All the kids that he was supposedly associated with back in again the following day.
Yeah.
Got rumbled. What you thought he was going to get away with?
I do think on those lateral flow tests, though, they should. I mean, when we first started doing them, because there's like a line that's one of the lines says C, which when I first read it, logically C would mean coronavirus to me, right? But it's not. That's the other.
It's not. Yeah.
So like, my daughter showed me the test first time. I'm like, oh crap! And then you read the thing.
Yeah. Damn it.
Okay.
No,
that's what C could also stand for. But yeah, it's I'm not absolutely sure about the high accuracy of them, and I think people have.
I think they should do what they did with. I think they should do what they did with pregnancy tests, where they tried to take out any ambiguity, where it basically says pregnant, not pregnant, or problem. Right? If they'd have done that, it'd be much more straightforward.
No, agreed. My husband, talking about the different batches, my husband had one that was coming up with a very faint line against it. Is it T? I can't remember what the second letter is. So it has a strong one against the C and then a very faint one against the T. And again, it's the same thing. If you do it from a different box, then it was doing it. So in the end, he just binned those. Because I was like phoning him. It was the morning after we'd been to London to see our friends, and I looked at his test and I went, we've just seen everybody. Oh my God, what a nightmare. You can make a phone call. I'm not doing it. And he did another one and he was fine.
Speaking, going back to the office, like Rick was, I mean, I did a couple of weeks back because, the office is starting to let people in if they needed to or wanted to, so you can book and go. So we did a team session. So all of the group people came. Alex also came, and so we did that. But it was quite weird. One of the things that you, again, seem to not think about is that a lot of people actually joined after the lockdown. So there were a lot of people in our team that we've been working for like over a year now and only seeing them for the first time. And they didn't even know where the office was and how it looked like.
That's the thing. We're trying to do meetups now, and it's so funny because nobody can make the same time. We've all got so many other things going on, and it's just, do you know what? Forget it. It's too much like hard work trying to organise. meet up, we all just phone and Zoom each other again. It's yeah, offices are opening from September, I think, for us. We're gonna have to book desks. But I don't think they tell you whereabouts in the building your desk is. So if you wanted to book in with a group of people, so again, it's going to be team. When you all want to go in, book a desk on those days. And I don't know if you can request grouping or not. I don't think they've worked that out yet.
Yeah, I don't know how we're going to do ours. I imagine it'll be the same. So. But we've changed a couple of buildings since as well, so everybody's now being consolidated into another one. So I don't think we've quite decided how that's going to work yet.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite funny to see, first of all, showing people around, okay, this is, I mean, you are part of our team, but do you know that this is where we guys normally sit? So we are doing a tour as well at the same time.
Oh, fantastic.
And there was this revolving door. So we have this, and on the ground floor, there's a revolving door that goes to the atrium. So it's a very narrow one. So you could tell who was new. All the people who've been old and been to Rackspace obviously have this timing set that you scan your badge and walk through,
right,
even though it's quite narrow. Everyone who was new was getting stuck. It was quite funny to see that, they obviously didn't have that timing set and they were getting stuck in that.
Don't worry, you'll perfect it when you've been here for a while.
Everyone has perfect timing who's been there for a while. So it was quite funny to see that. But it was a nice day. Is what you don't realize that, when you typically have been away, but then go and meet everyone. It's quite an enjoyable thing to do.
Oh, be nice. I'm looking forward to it.
Have you guys not been at all to the office since the lockdowns, or?
No, yeah, it's second week of March last year. It's the last time I went to the office.
It's going to feel weird then.
I think January last year, I think was the last time I was in.
Oh, so it's been 2 months anyway since you've been in that good time when it all shut down.
But my philosophy is if I'm in the office, I'm not earning. I can't remember which year I was there.
Were you in all the time then, Rick?
I never go to the office. That's just admin.
Oh.
Yeah, you go to the client side, get paid.
Yeah, true.
I imagine it's the same for anyone who works in a global company, right? I mean, it's like literally, I go to my office in London, I sit there on the phone to people in, I don't know, Switzerland, America, whoever else, and I look around at the people I'm sitting with, going, I don't know any of these people because it's all hot desking.
Exactly. I was about to say typical hot desks.
Yeah. At Rackspace, so far it's not. So I still have my desk, or Alex as is, and other people. But we do think that going forward, it might change to something on those lines, or at least partially, because again, the patterns will no doubt change.
Yeah. I mean, I imagine I was going to say, you probably see the same, right? Even in buildings where it's all, technically fully agile and hot desking, right? You see people doing those subtle kind of things where they leave pictures of their kids on their desk or leave an old jacket over the chair. Someone doesn't get their desk. I'm sure all that's going to creep in, because at the moment, I imagine someone comes through with napalm and just clears the desks at the end of the day.
I hose the lot.
Yeah. Well, the other one is designated days. So we've got things like the train companies that are saying get rid of season tickets, and they're moving to one which is for 2 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
But like 200 reducing the cost per year when the season ticket's like $5,000. Wow, what a big discount. But if you have designated days, so like we're in on, I don't know, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then everyone comes over those days, then you make the use of actually being face to face.
You know what though? That is going to be the thing. It's going to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays are going to be the really crazy days, because everyone in their head is going to think, don't go on a Monday, it's crazy, and no one goes to the office on a Friday anyway. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is going to be gridlock days.
Yep. I was going to say there'll be no desks anywhere Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Monday will be a ghost town because everyone wants the same pattern. Yeah.
Maybe we're going to reverse it and actually make Monday and Fridays the day to go in.
Well, that's as a consultant, I would typically do a 3-day week, because you can't get the customer's time on a Monday because they're planning what they're going to do with the week, and everyone works from home on the Friday.
Yeah.
And no change Friday, so they're discussing what they have done for the week. So any work's only done Tuesday to Thursday.
Yeah.
Not that big,
and Friday is probably never going to be busy